Chapter 12. "Bless you, child!" Miss exclaimed as Robbie entered her cottage. "What was such a storm? I didn't expect you today. Get out of those wet clothes at once and sit by the fire, or you'll catch your death of cold." She handed him a warm blanket and turned her back. "No, I won't. I'll never get sick," he said, taking off his wet things anyway and wrapping himself in the blanket. "No, I don't suppose you do. A healer as strong as you wouldn't." The herb witch hung his wet clothes over the fire to dry. "What's being a healer got to do with it?" Miss set out tea and cakes. "Everything, child. Healers are immune to almost all illnesses. We also heal from our injuries much more quickly than others. Still, being warm never hurt anyone. Drink up." She pointed to his tea. "Drink it straight. No honey or cream today." Robbie drank it with a grimace. This cup of tea was probably the worst he'd ever tasted. "If you're worried about warming me up, maybe you should add a splash of brandy," he said, hoping it would make the tea taste better. "Holy Sulas, no, child. Healers can't tolerate alcohol. As powerful as you are, a splash of brandy would probably lay you out for a week." Miss settled herself into her chair and picked up her own cup of tea. She seemed to savor the aroma. "Finish your tea, and we'll continue your lesson on seeing your energy. I've put some chamomile and lavender in it. I'm hoping the herbs will help you relax further today, so drink it all. If it tastes this bad, it better do something." Miss had started teaching him the relaxation rituals over a week ago, and he hadn't yet been able to see anything. "I'm sorry, my child. Maybe a healer can't teach an healer. The healing of people and animals seems so similar. I never dreamed we'd encounter such difficulties." "It doesn't make any sense a person can't heal both. Why would there be any difference?" he asked, choking down the horrible tea. Miss shook her head. "That's one of Sulas's many mysteries. Only in legends have I heard of anyone whose power is strong enough to heal both." She got the look on her face he didn't like, the one that said he might someday be the hero of such a legend. When he finished the last of the awful tea, Miss directed him to close his eyes. He felt very relaxed, almost sleepy. "Look inward," Miss said. "Relax and look to the very heart of your being." Robbie drifted inward. While he barely moved a muscle, his sessions with Mist always left him more exhausted than sword practice with Brazen. To his frustration, he saw nothing yet again. But the tea was working on him, helping him to relax further and drift farther inward than he had before. He gasped as he saw something. "What is it, child?" Miss asked. He heard her as if he were at the bottom of a deep well. He was too far away to answer. The thing he saw wasn't like the pure light Mist had described. Instead, it was like a huge dam stopping the energy's flow, as if his magic was a river of power. He could see the edges of his energy building behind the dam, straining to break free. He reached for it, as Miss said he should, but he felt as if he were beating his head against the dam. Miss had warned him against trying to force the process, but he was tired of sitting there day after day and accomplishing nothing. He slammed his mind against the dam. Suddenly, his whole body exploded with pain. He screamed and fell writhing on the ground. He hurled himself away from the agony and forced his way back to the surface of consciousness. The pain stopped as suddenly as it had begun. He opened his eyes and found himself naked and panting on the floor of the herb witch's cottage. The herb witch was kneeling at his side. "My child, are you all right?" Reaching for the blanket to cover himself, Robbie sobbed. "What happened?" Miss resumed her seat and took such a long while to answer Robbie grew afraid. Perhaps it meant he was a demon after all. "That, my child, was your power. As I told you, it can't be forced." The herb witch fell silent and refused to meet his gaze. "What is it you aren't telling me?" "I have always thought of myself as a powerful healer. But, my child, what I just saw in you makes my energy look like a small stream next to the great ocean. I would never have imagined a human frame could contain that much. When you are able to access it, I have no doubt that someday the bards will sing of you." She paused again, and she looked at him almost worshipfully. "My only question is, what will they sing? I know you have been treated appallingly, but power like yours can't afford the luxury of hatred. Remember, the power to heal is also the power to harm." Miss took hold of his hand. "The touch of this hand can bring health or illness, life or death. But if the gift of the goddess is used for evil, it will twist and mangle your soul until nothing of your true self remains. Once I almost destroyed myself this way. Be smarter than I was. Don't allow your father's brutality to warp the goodness of your heart. My child, when the bards sing of you, be the hero of their tales, not the villain." Robbie pulled his hand free, reached for his clothes, and dressed quickly. You expect too much of me." He fled the cottage. As he drew closer to the farm, the muscles in his abdomen clenched painfully. Thunder had gone into labor, and she was in trouble. He galloped into the farmyard and vaulted off Wild Thing's back. When he ran into the barn, he found his father, Alan, and Darren crowded around the pregnant mare.
"Where have you been, boy?" Angus bellowed. "If she dies, I'll have your hide for it."
Robbie clenched his fist.
"And who was it that insisted on breeding her so soon? Have you learned nothing about when females are fit to give birth?"
Angus lifted his hand to strike Robbie, but Robbie jumped back.
"Don't think you can bully me, old man."
Robbie folded his arms and glared at his father, but Thunder's cry caused him to relent. "Save my baby." Robbie dropped beside the mare and touched her. "Holy Sudas, what can I do about this? They'll both die." The afterbirth had torn away from the walls of the wound, causing Thunder to bleed profusely. The foal was suffocating in his mother's blood. If he was going to have a chance of saving them, he needed the energy he'd seen on the other side of the dam. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The mare's pain pulled against something deep inside of him, and he felt a trickle of his energy. It wasn't enough. "Thunder, help me. Show me where it is." Robbie followed the path of the mare's pain deeper into the heart of his being, searching until he found the dam. It's no use. But joined to Thunder's need, he saw something he hadn't at Miss Cottage. The dam didn't block all of his energy. A small stream flowed from behind it as if a sluice gate had been opened in the dam. He grabbed it and began sending it into Thunder. His body flooded with joy, and Thunder's life signs became stronger. He found and closed the vessels that were leaking the horse's life and strengthened the muscles needed to expel the foal. His father leaned down and patted the mare. "It'll be okay, Thunder."
"He threatens to beat me while he talks like that to his horse. How dare Miss tell me I'm not allowed to hate?"
He heard Thunder gasp. He'd wrapped his energy around her heart and was crushing it. "Holy Sudas, no!" Panicking, he gathered up his anger and shifted it aside, and the energy flowed back into its previous pattern. The foal slipped from its mother's body. Abruptly, Robbie collapsed into the straw, shaking with fear. "I guess we know how the barge will sing of me." The world went dark. When Robbie regained consciousness, a blanket had been thrown over him, but he was still lying on the floor of the barn. As he sat up, he heard the soft noises a mare makes to her baby. He wanted to be happy he'd made it possible, but it scared him how close he'd come to killing the horse instead. Just what have I become? He didn't have an answer, but he knew precisely when the changes began. He got shakily to his feet, saddled Wild Thing, and headed for the forest stable. It was freezing cold, but the moon reflecting off the snow provided plenty of light. When he reached the stable, Brazen was waiting by the paddock fence. He didn't greet her, but went straight inside the stable, pulled the bronze sword from its scabbard, and went back out into the night.
"Brazen, I've had it. You tell me what you're doing here, or—"
"You are ready," Brazen interrupted. Robbie heard a noise behind him. He turned. A knight stood less than 6 feet away, holding a bronze-hilted sword and wearing bronze armor. The visor of his helm was closed, so Robbie couldn't see his face. Brazen's owner had finally tracked her down.
"My lord," Robbie stammered. "I found your horse."
Without saying a word, the knight lunged. Robbie barely got his own blade up in time to parry.
"My lord, I didn't know who she belonged to. I've been taking care of her."
The knight's only response was a sword thrust towards his heart, which Robbie avoided by a quick move back and to the side.
"Please, my lord, let me explain."
The knight swung a brutal blow towards his head. Robbie ducked and fought for distance. It was immediately both clear that the knight was better than he was, and that the knight's goal was to kill him. Robbie called to Wild Thing for help, but the mare seemed completely unconcerned. Even more maddening, he could feel Brazen in his mind, directing him towards the next movement.
"Damn you both! Help me!"
But both simply stood there, watching as if his death were a mildly entertaining show. Robbie saw the killing blow as if it were in slow motion. He parried far too widely, throwing himself off balance and leaving his entire left side unprotected. The knight swung his sword, and Robbie screamed as it cut through his side and into his heart. When the knight pulled his sword free, it was red with Robbie's blood. But Robbie didn't collapse as the dead should, and when he looked down, there was no wound. His coat hadn't even been torn. He looked in disbelief at the knight, who saluted him with his bloody sword and then disappeared.
"What?"
he gasped. "A good beginning. You have done well. Tomorrow I will teach you more."
What happened?"
"You were ready. To improve your skills, you now needed an opponent, so I created the illusion of one." Robbie pointed his sword at Brazen's throat. His whole body was shaking. You could have warned me. I thought your owner had come to claim you over my dead body. You were ready. Robbie stomped back inside the stable and slammed his sword back into its scabbard. Damn her to the seven hells. That's probably where she came from in the first place. I'll never come here again. But he knew he was lying. He felt brazen in his mind, replaying the battle. The horse showed him what he'd done well, and where he'd made the mistake that would have cost him his life. As he watched, he couldn't help feeling a growing sense of pride. While he'd lost the fight, he'd learned much.